Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace reporting live here at the City Winery here at Pier 57 here in New York City. NEA Jazz Master and five-time Grammy award-winning bassist and composer Stanley Clarke tonight is performing with his quartet. Now, in a career spanning some 5 decades, Mr. Clarke has recorded with some of the most important jazz stalwarts in the game, and I'm talking about guys from George Duke to the great Pharoah Sanders to the great Dexter Gordon, just to name the many endless few. One of the most important parts of Mr. Clarke's musicianship is making sure that the next generation of musicians have the opportunity to bless the band stage. And tonight you're going to see a very young Julius Rodriguez on keyboards, Wallace Roney Jr. on trumpet, the son of the legendary Wallace Roney, as well as Jerry Allen. Also, the great Miles Martin on drums. We had a chance to sit down and break bread and reflect on some of his recording experiences early on in his career. We sit down and talk about the importance of the great Larry Graham as a bassist and contributor to the music. Also, we sit down and reflect on the great Jeff Beck, who's a very dear friend of his. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of the Stanley Clarke Quartet live here at the City Winery, here on the Pace Report, here in New York City. going to start this whole interview in a very different direction, but I want to commend you on this new band. I can say that I followed Julius since he was about 18 or 19. I followed Wallace when he was 14, 15 years old. Tell me about the drummer.
Drummer Miles Martin. He's, you know, I kind of fell into him by accident. Someone had told me I was looking for a drummer, new drummer, because this year I'm going to have a couple different bands. You know, I have a double record that's coming out with 15 songs on it. It's got different bands, different music, and different things. And I needed a drummer live like him. And someone just said, this is a guy that lives like literally 10, 15 minutes from me, out in LA. I said, oh, great. So he came out of the house and he played, and it was great. It's really pretty much that simple. He's a great drummer. He is serious.
Tell me about these musicians in the now and who they are carrying the lineage on of the elders that played this music.
Well, I mean, I think just in general, in jazz music, you know, like these guys, you could hear all the elders in their playing. You can hear, you know, I mean, and these aren't the only guys. There's probably a layer of about 15, 20 guys that are really, really serious young players. And, you know, it just happens, you know. I know sometimes young players, they just come up and they first of all learn the language, but then they also understand the importance of the music and, you know, what it is to the community, and understand that music is not just going to go further in life based on radio and press. It has to be taken there. And I was like that. When I played, I recognized that at a very young age, like I had to pass this on. Like I'm playing, I might be in my 20s right now, but I gotta keep developing, keep going. One day I'm gonna pass it on to someone else. So I don't know whether it's an African thing or not. It's just you do that sometimes when you can't count on, you know, standard things. And in our case, I mean, radio and even records, like kind of what happened with the industry has changed a lot. You know, so serious players, I think they take it upon themselves to move the music forward. And these guys have it. And Julius, Miles, and Wallace. You know, I mean, it's funny. Julius showed me a picture when he met me. I was cracking up, man. He looked like he was 4 years old, man.
Wow.
He was so young, man. It was incredible. So, you know, it's just what happens. It's what it is.
Stanley, you have a brand new double album coming out. And there's a saying, everything old is new again. Did you ever in a million years, some 50 years later, think that we will be coming back to vinyl again?
You know, vinyl sounds so good and it's so special, even the kind of ritual of putting a record on a record player and clean the vinyl, and you know, you make sure your stylus is in good shape, and your speakers are right, and all that. You don't want scratches the way you know, take your record out of the jacket, put it back in. I mean, there's a whole thing that there's no way that was just going to disappear. It was just so, and it really never did disappear. There are people that still listen to vinyl always. It's just now it's actually coming back, because I think part of it is a recognition of the ritual, like liking something, because the CDs kind of became these things where you could just kind of flip them in and that's it. You know, there was not much to it. The sound was nice, but not like I don't want to say the vinyl is better or that the CD is better. It's just different. With the record, the vinyl, if you got a good piece of vinyl, there's a sound to that you can't get on CD. You know, so it's really nice. So yeah, so my album has two pieces of vinyl, a CD as well. It's so funny, you get 15 songs on a CD. That's amazing. And it's got a book. The book is like some picture, it's like kind of a picture book. I took the idea from Quincy Jones. Quincy was kidding around. He says, Stanley, he was showing me his book. He says, I said, Quincy, all you got is pictures in here. He says, man, nobody reads anymore. He says, just put a picture there and say a sentence or two about it, and that's it. I cracked up. So it ain't quite that extreme. I mean, just some things that I write in there, but it's a good book. And then the other thing I really like about this album, which I got really frustrated a long time ago with CDs and streaming, is that my record has liner notes, real liner notes, where you see, like the old days, every specific thing about that song, particular song. So it's nice. It's a nice thing. It's going to be considered like a box, and it's going to be nice for people.
What's on the album? What kind of music do we expect?
Everything that you've ever expected or seen me do is on the album. I actually took a couple old songs and redid them. Some of them you recognize, some of them you don't. And but it's very nice. That's all I can say is it's a fantastic record. Took some time, really mixed it well, put a lot of my own resources in it, and just did. It's not a record that I feel that is part of the industry necessarily. It's a record. It's from me to fans and anybody else that wants to get into it. It's a real nice part.
I want to talk about the rhythm of the future. I watched this, and we talked earlier about your band. This documentary really showcases how you're really bringing the next generation forward with this music. Why did you decide to do this documentary?
I actually didn't do it. It was a woman that did it. She decided to do it. I'm not really good at let's do a documentary and let's do it like this. There's another one I can send you that's really nice too as well, but she really wants to do a documentary. I just figure, when you get older, people, they want to document you, so she basically, I teach have a 3-year residency over at Santa Monica College, and usually when I'm over there, they're filming it for their classes and they just have to film all that stuff. Maybe some students want to reference something I'm doing, and they took all those little things and put them together, and they spoke to some musicians, some of the kids, and then one made it documentary.
out as a musician, starting off from where you are now, when you accompany other musicians, what's the ear that you have to have in order to play with somebody?
You know, when you're accompanying someone, especially when you're on a bass player, one of the things you have to recognize is the function of your instrument, the standard function. I know, you know, one of the things I did with the bass, and not just me, other bass players too, is we got into playing solo bass or standout bass, you know, whether it's whoever, you know, but underneath all that, you have to, I think as a bass player, you have to understand the function of your instrument. And, you know, you're supported with the sound, you're down at the bottom of the sound with the drums. But I think when you're listening and you're actually playing with someone, you have to make them and the song sound better than before you start playing. You know, that's the real key. If you don't do that, then what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, you know, what's the point like playing? You don't even need a bass or something. So what I do is if someone, like, I don't do a lot of sessions like I used to. I used to do a lot of sessions. And recently I was listening, I hadn't heard this record in, I don't know how long, 30 years, could be 40 years ago. It was a record I did with Aretha Franklin, and it was before I played the Olympic bass. It was early 70s, like 73, 74, something like that. And the record was called Let Me In Your Life. And, you know, I was listening to myself playing, and I was recalling what I was feeling that day, which was, because it was such an amazing thing. I mean, in those days, everybody recorded at the same time. So in that session, strings, horns, rhythm section, brass, background singers, and then the Queen came out and sang. And when you got done, you know, the engineers knew that I was interested in sound. They'd see me look at the recorder, and he invited me in the control room. I went in the control room, and the record was there. There was no like, oh, let's spend like a week mixing. That was it. And then I heard the record was on the street. It seemed like within 10 days. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They don't do that anymore. And the reason why I bring that up is because when that session started, there was no time to be thinking about anything other than how am I going to enhance this song and really support the Queen with this, Aretha. It's not like, you know, you don't think, well, how am I going to shine with this? Because it's not about that. It's, you know, it's Aretha Franklin record. And although I did have a couple licks in there that was unusual for the time, I was like, oh, I did that. Okay, I see. You know, so it just boils down to like, you know, what the job is, what's required. I mean, the same thing like in film composing, when I got into film composing, like you got to do something for the scene, not something that pulls you out of the movie. What the most important thing for a film composer is if someone's watching a film, you don't want them to ever forget what the story's about and what that character is doing. It's the same thing with live music. Like if you're a bass player and you're playing for a singer, songwriter, and you're playing, you don't want to play something that's going to pull people away from the singer, songwriter, and the lyrics, and go, you know, you don't want that, because that makes the song a little less. The song is always everything, you know, always.
Let's break down some of the saxophonists you accompanied and recorded with. First one I want to talk about, and everyone knows about this music association, Stan Getz. And you were on that iconic Captain Marvel record with Chick Corea, Airto, and Tony Williams. How old were you at the time when you recorded that?
Maybe 19.
What?
19, 20 the most, I think. What year was that?
72.
Okay, so I was born in 51, so 51, 61, 71, 20, 21 exactly.
Okay, so Tony Williams was in the '60s. He was the young Marvel.
That's right.
You're on bass. You're the young Marvel too.
Yeah.
Tell me about this experience.
I love playing with Tony. You know, Tony was like an unusual brother to me, kind of a big brother, different. He was a very different kind of guy. He was the guy that beat his own drum. You know, he was really, he was in with everybody, but then you got the feeling like he was somewhere else, you know, because he had his own, you know, the thing about Tony, what I liked about Tony, and I like a lot of other musicians, some people have the courage, and I have to use that word courage because it's specific what I'm talking about. He had the courage to really be himself, not be like somebody. It's easy in the art world to copy someone, and sometimes you have to, and there's nothing wrong with it. But then every now and then there's these individuals that they just have to do their own thing. Or by default, they are like the way they are. Like Thelonious Monk. I don't think Thelonious Monk woke up one day and said, oh, I'm going to be different.
Right.
I mean, he was just different, you know. Ornette Coleman the same way. I mean, so many people, even in the rock and roll world. Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, you know, played a lot with Jeff Beck, and that's the way he plays.
Yeah.
You know, but what happens is sometimes when you're unusual and unique, there's always that person around when you're young at what you're doing. When a musician is their most vulnerable is when they're young and they're doing something that's unusual. There's always a person that will come up and go, man, that ain't working, or that ain't shit, or this, that. Always, and depending on the type of person you are, you could be that person that just disregards everything that you worked on and dismiss what you're playing. And not only do you get a chance to play it, but the world. Not only do you get the chance, you don't have a chance again to hear yourself do it, but what's bigger is the world doesn't get a chance to hear what you have. I mean, imagine if that would have happened to Prince. Imagine if that would have happened to Michael Jackson. Imagine John Coltrane. You know, and sometimes people did say John Coltrane was funny, this or that, or whatever. There were a lot of, I mean, I have to say that I got it too. I mean, here I'm like a guy holding a bass, standing in front of a band, bold and whatever.
Right.
Now here it is, yeah, it's right here. The guitar player's back there, the trumpet's over there, it's right here. And you know what? And to me, what I did was actually even not that, it wasn't that much about playing the bass great. What happened was I recognized that, see, first of all, I'm really a composer at heart. You know, I play the bass, play piano, a few other things, but really what I am is a composer. And I noticed that at that time, early 70s, there was absolutely nothing written for that bass. There's nothing like 1970. I mean, there was one instruction book by Carol Kay, and that thing had a bunch of whole notes in it.
Well, that's because she played all those session records.
Yeah, well, she made the book so simple. I mean, she could have handled all that with one page. You know, 8, 12 notes, whole notes, play them all, hold them for 4 beats, and then go to the next. I mean, it was nothing to it. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to write some music for electric bass. And of course, there's going to be some acoustic bass, but I'm going to write it for electric bass. And I'm going to make the songs real simple that anybody can play. The first one I did was a tune for the electric bass. It was called Lopsy Lou. And Lopsy Lou, that's the name of the song, but that's actually bass folk song number 2. I wrote a bunch of bass folk songs. And what they were is songs that you could play on the bass And what made it a bass folk song is three things. Rhythmically, you had to be able to play the rhythm without a drum. You don't need a drum. It had to have chords and a melody. And so all those three elements had to be in the song and played by the bass. You don't need anything else. And lots of it was like that. And the very first one I did was for the acoustic bass. It was called Bass Folk Songs. That was number one. And then I've written quite a few others. I think it was about 19 or 20 now. So I played one tonight, as a matter of fact.
Now, you say this because when I look at when you came out, late 60s, early 70s, funk was really coming into a very, very different fold with Sly and the Family Stone, Joe Tex, and then Funkadelic eventually. And the bass came to the forefront. Was that because of your youth, or was that just like you said, you just wanted to play?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was. I think it was just I wanted to do something on bass. I remember I did this song, which was "Silly Putty," and was on the third album. And "Silly Putty" was like it was really fun. And I remember I was playing somewhere with chicks somewhere, and some theater, and some guy said, "Man, there's a guy on the phone that wants to talk to you, man." And I get on the phone, and I have, "Oh, Stanley, Baba, dude, but it was Boozy." Baby, his man, that silly putty. That's all he was talking about was silly putty, silly putty. So it obviously communicated. It obviously, like, that wasn't my intention, but bass players heard it and said, "Wow, yeah."
What was your take on Sly and the Family Stone?
The best thing, I liked Sly, but the best thing that happened for Larry was when he left the band.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't hear him, and the way they mixed the record, I couldn't really hear Larry really distinctively because it was so focused on the vocal, which was great. Those songs, that's why I love those songs, Joe. But when he left and created Graham Central Station, that was great. That was really good. And see, Larry, and I haven't said this too many times, but I will say this, that on the electric bass, to me, like people will talk about Jaco Pastorius, or they'll talk about me, or whoever is like the greatest or the most important bass player. The most important electric bass player was Larry Graham, and I'll tell you why. Because, people have a misconception of what makes an innovator. It has nothing to do with how fast you play, how fancy you play. If you do something that changes the game completely, now, to not disrespect Jaco or myself, we did things that people do. There was no doubt about it. But Larry, with this thing here, what he added a whole new language to the bass. Because if anybody plucks the bass, it comes from Larry.
So you're saying he even more than James Jamerson, Motown?
To me, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because what Larry brought, well, see, James was in many ways like the grandfather, the grandmaster. But when Larry came along, he brought like a whole new function. I'll give you an example. Like everybody that has an electric bass has either slapped, tried to slap, thinking about slapping, or have slapped and gave it up. I play Olympics, I play a certain way, technique. Jaco has a sound, he's playing things. But I mean, we didn't add function necessarily to the instrument. Larry added a whole function that you could take and expand on. I learned how to slap on the bass from a drummer. Lenny White said, "Man, have you heard seen this?" I said, "What?" We were in San Francisco. He had a thumb and one finger. It was funky. It looked really messed up. I said, "Man, you look crippled playing the damn bass, man." I said, "But it was funky." I said, "What is that?" He says, "That's," and then he said, "You try it." And I did it. And that was it. And I didn't really focus on Larry Graham that much. Just something that Lenny had. But then, myself, Miroslav Vidos, and Carlos Santana went to see Graham Central Station in Oakland. Boy,
He turned it out.
boy.
And it's funny you say that because
Yeah.
Prince heavily influenced by that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Larry to me is the most influential electric bass player, period. It has nothing to do with technique or how fast or how slow or how melodic. He developed a language and a complete technique, a complete technique that anybody can use. And it's like another, you know what it's like? It's like, I'll give you a great example. It's like you're a warrior and you go out there in the field and you face your enemy with a bow and arrow, and then somebody gives you a gun. It's a different game.
Different game, right?
Game. That's going to be falling, man.
Right.
They come in, and it's, you know what I mean? It's like that. Or you go out there with a gun. And then, you're doing your thing, and then all of a sudden someone gives you a machine gun or a missile launcher from your shoulder. It's like a real paradigm shift, really a shift in what Larry did. And, and it's really something, I love Larry. When people ask me that, what do I think about that particular type of playing, I say that some people get startled, And I totally understand. I mean, what the other bass players did is magnificent. But when you look at how many guys, like a lot of guys don't play like me. Lots of guys don't play like Jocko or Jeff Berlin or whoever. Even James Jamerson. Guys that don't play can't. They can't do it.
Right.
But everybody at some point can slap on the bass. May not be well, but they can do it. And that's why he's important. He gave us something else. Imagine if nobody could slap on the bass. Imagine if that never existed.
It'd be bland.
There you go.
It'd be like Chinese food without.
Yeah. So that shows you the value of what he did. Like, you cannot have James Jamerson in your playing. You cannot have me or Jocko in your playing, and you're playing bass. You got stuff to play. You just not playing like Stanley Clarke or Jocko or Jeff Berlin or whoever. But if you take Larry away, the shit is going to be bland, man. There's going to be no funk.
Yeah.
I mean, the funk will go only up to here. But if you want it to go up to there, you got to put this other language that's been inserted in the whole bass lexicon. So.
This is a new part of the interview called Vinyl Imprint. Now, in this bag are recordings that you were part of, solo, accompanied. I want you to pull out the first record, show it to my viewers, and tell everybody about this particular record. And we talked about this early on in the interview. Pull the first record out.
Okay, so this is Aretha. Yeah, this record is nice. You know what I like about this record? Well, there's a lot of hit records on there, so it was nice to walk down the street and hear records come out of grocery stores and, you know, food shops and, you know, radio every 10 minutes. So that was nice. Yeah, it's really love, yeah. They call me Stan Clarke back then. And there ain't nothing like the real thing. Ain't nothing like the real thing. Yeah, there's a lot of hits on this record.
Now, you were in the lexicon of great record men.
Yeah.
Jerry Wexler. Aretha Martin did the arrangements. Did he produce or did he?
You know, I don't remember. I wasn't really that focused on who did what. All I remember is Jerry, Aretha, Tom Dowd, Jerry Wexler. That's all. Aretha Martin. Yeah, that's all I remember. You know, Ralph McDonald and Bill Eaton.
What do you remember most about that?
What I remember the most is how Aretha could just come out and just handle the whole thing, just handle business. She just like, there was no like, it's like, if she sang, it was great. It doesn't matter, it was never not great. Yeah, you could get her to do it maybe a little better or something a little different, but Aretha was Aretha. It's kind of like a flower, like a rose that's grown. You don't go like, oh wow, that could be a little better if it could regrow it. It just is. She is, you know, of the earth. She's of the earth, man. She's a queen, true queen.
Pull out the next record. One more time. Now this is another one of your Philadelphia homeboys. Tell me about this record right here. Show my people what
I
this
really
is.
like Norman. Norman was a trip. Norman, what I liked about Norman was that he was a great organizer and a visionary. Because it wasn't so much about him playing the drums. He played the drums, but he was a guy that could go through any door. He'd never knocked on a door. He just went through it. Will you play with me? Herbie, I need you to play with me. I need you to sing with me. And he was such a cool dude, nice cat, that people just would go play with him. And this record, Dark Black, there was another record.
The one before that was, I think, a blue. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was my song. He was one of the first guys to give me a shot. Oh, I did it too? Oh, Laughter. Wow, I don't even remember that. You know, he gave me a shot. You know, hey, you know, write something, do something.
You got Eddie and Gary Bartz on this record. This is, I mean, and the thing I love about Norman is that he encompassed Black American music.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the 70s and 80s, he was producing Michael Henderson and Phyllis Hyman, and he went in a very different direction also.
Yeah. Well, you know, he had to hit with Michael Henderson, "You Are My
Starship."
And, you know, Michael was special. There's another bass player that's just special, you know. And you know, once you get up into that realm, you know, you produce a record, you sell 1 million records, a lot of people come to you and they want you to produce stuff. And you're a fool to turn it down. So he had to produce his career. You know, it was great.
We'll have the next one.
Oh my God. You know, this record, I didn't listen to it since I played it and never listened to it because I was so intimidated. I have no idea what it sounded like. I was so intimidated. Dad Jones, Hank Jones, Stan Clarke, and Louis Hayes.
How old? This is 73?
So I was 22.
Okay, so you did 2 records with Dexter.
Yeah. What was the other one?
There's one before that. I have some albums that just grab what I can find. But this is an amazing record. What was it like playing with them?
Well, it was just intimidating, you know, because I'm 22 and then Dexter Gordon was there. That's it. You know, and then he came in the door and said, "Where's the download?" Just like that. You know, it's you know, at 22. You know,
What about
even Coltrane coming
Right.
out. See this guy, this is Dexter Gordon.
what's he like compared to Stan Getz or Joe Henderson?
Well, there's no comparison. See, jazz music, you can't compare these guys. It's not like rock music or music or the new jazz, because there's too much language that everybody's common. Back in those days, I was fortunate enough to come to the end of the romantic jazz where no one was copying anybody. He wasn't copying Coltrane. There was like influences that ran through, but each one of these guys were unique and they were their own persons. You can't compare them. Like Jeff, I'm comparing Joe Henderson to Dexter Gordon, I'm comparing a butterfly to an owl. It's just, you can't, there's no sense in being comparative because they're so different. And Joe's much younger than Dexter, and I think Joe was one before. I mean, not Joe. But yeah, that's amazing.
Now let's talk about creativity. Let's talk about creativity because we'll pull out this one too.
Yeah, well, this fine.
Now, there's a couple of things about Diodato that I'm having a problem with the jazz police and historians because this gentleman was an incredible arranger as well as keyboard player. Tell me about Diodato.
You know, he was a good musician, great arranger, and you know, to me, I just came in for the session. I didn't really know him that well, and I just came in for the session. Brazilian musician, and he played. I won this record. Won on every song. Sure. Yeah, I don't remember much about it, but it's a good record.
It is. Tell me about Creed Taylor.
Creed was a really interesting guy, man. I mean, he always whispered. He looked like a mafia boss. When he'd come over to talk, he'd whisper something here and walk away. Everybody's looking like, what the hell's Creed saying? You know, he was so. What he worked with Rudy Van Gelder, the great Rudy Van Gelder at the Van Gelder Studios. It was fantastic. I loved the work because the equipment was stellar. The vinyl they chose, they had a certain level of quality with their vinyl. The records were heavier. I mean, look at the covers. The covers were really well made, and unlike say the Blue Note records. Right. So Creed was into quality. Always liked him. Paid me on time. Everything was great.
You were on another one of my favorite Creek Taylor records, Joe Farrell, with Jack DeJohnette.
Oh, I know that one. Moon Germs.
Yes.
Yeah. Moon Germs is special because there's a story behind that. That's not the original work. The original Moon Germs was made by myself, Tony Williams, Keith Jarrett, Joe Farrell, and Freddie Hubbard.
What happened?
There was arguments, and so there was a big argument. I don't like to talk about stuff, and I never would piss on a man's grave. I'll just tell you that it was a big argument, and Creed canceled the session. But what was funny was another one of those whispering moments. He walks around, looks at Keith, and looks at Tony, and then he comes over to me and whispers into my ear, and everybody knows. He says, "All right, Stanley, I'll call you. I want you to come back." And then he walks away. And everybody knows what's, I mean, why would he talk to me? Like, like, I wish you'd never come, or, dirty bastard. I mean, he didn't say that. It was obvious because he looked at Keith like, yeah. And, it was just he was a band. Then it was Herbie Hancock, Jack, myself, Joe, and I think Dad Jones. Somebody like that. Was it Freddie? I don't know.
about Jeff Beck. He plays a very special part of me because as the person listening to Wired and Blow by Blow in middle school and high school, there was an ear for jazz, there was an ear for rock, there was an ear for fusion, and he has a very special part because he was on your third record, and he's been on a couple of your albums.
Records, and we did a couple tours. Yeah, Jeff was special to me because out of all, there's two rock guitar players that are totally unique, and I really respect them for what they did. Like, it had nothing to do with how fast or how virtuoso. It's just that the guys, I mean, one was Jeff Beck, the other one was Keith Richards. But with Jeff had his own style. Nobody sounded like him. He didn't play with a pick, he played with his thumb, and every now and then he might have a pick, but that really wasn't his thing. And he was really like melodically orientated. He liked Carlos Santana. Like, there are a lot of rock guitar players that could play bluesy. I mean, even Jimi Hendrix wasn't a melodic guy like a Carlos Santana or Jeff Beck. Those guys could take a rock and roll song, but they could take a standard and play the melody, and you really believe the melody. And they, you know, not that they could play on the changes or anything. That has nothing to do with it, because all the standards were show tunes, many of them. But Jeff could play like a melody, like when he did I played Pork Pie Hat. The way he played Charlie Mingus, he loved Charlie Mingus. He loved Miles Davis. The great rock players always are guys that listen to a lot of music. And, you know, there's no partitions between great players. You know, the thing I don't like about music today, some of the top people, like, they have nothing to do with jazz or nothing to do with rock. They're really into their thing, and it just, but there's no understanding that maybe if you listen to this Miles Davis record, like I know Anderson Paak listens to other people and other music, you can hear it in his music. That's why his music has something that's a little more special. Even his delivery is special because of what he's heard. You know, you have to really, well, you don't have to, but I'm just saying it's just wise to check everybody out, you know, and especially if you're part of the, you know, black music or whatever you call, whatever that is, you gotta listen to everything.
Jeff Beck did to the Pork Pie Hat on guitar as what you did to that same song 10 years later on If This Bass Could Speak. Was that homage to Jeff, or was it to both him and me?
You know, it could have been. I think what Jeff did was he gave me an idea of what you could do with that song. Because I always heard it as a Charlie Mingus thing, but I'll tell you something. I redid something that was kind of inspired by Jeff, but I always liked this tune, and I thought that it should have been done different. I redid Crosby, Stills as Lovers. Wait till you hear that.
Oh wow.
Wait till you hear that.
It's on the new album.
Oh yeah.
I can't wait to hear it.
No, when you hear that, you're gonna.
Yeah.
That's one of the better tunes on it, right? It's really special, really melodic. You know, it's something that Gil Evans said one time about Miles Davis. He says, yeah, Miles Davis liked to play songs that were great vehicles. And he said, you know, like he'd say, a lot of these show tunes that he did. I mean, Coltrane with My Favorite Things. Everybody thinks he wrote the song, you know, and it comes from the sound of music, you know. And you know, there's this tune that Miles does, If I Were a Bell, which comes from one of the show tunes. And, you know, Crosby and His Lovers is like the Stevie Wonder song that he wrote for Sarita. I don't know, maybe who knows?
Well, they were married for a minute.
Yeah, maybe they were breaking up. I don't get into that with Stevie, but you know, and the way she sang it was so kind of depressing almost, you know. And then Jeff took it up a little bit, and I took it with the bass, kind of like, it's hard, you know, you just have to check it out. It's really, really, really good. I'm actually, that's one of the tunes I'm the most happy with, you know, because I was thinking about it, and I have nothing going on with my relationship, so everything is fine. I know people are going to say, why'd you record that? But no one said anything to Jeff either, you know, so it's just a great song for a string instrument that plays melody. I mean, it's great. And the bass was, Jeff did it. I don't think another guitar player would do it any more justice than Jeff. But this bass, the bass that I use, I got really, I think it's one of the best Olympic bass sounds I ever got, ever. And the melodic, yeah, you just have to check it out. dude. Yeah, now this is all fun for me. It's the best idea that a record company ever had. This record here, there was a guy named Vernon Slaughter that knew that me and George used to play on each other's records and play for other people and other things. And he says, you know what, you guys should make a record together. And he says, I tell you what, we're gonna buy you some clothes. We didn't dress like this. I never had pinstripe pants. Never in my, I think that's the only day I wore pinstripe pants and never wore them again, or before that. But it was cool. We had a top LA fashion guy, got us together, got our afros and stuff together. We put it in beautiful, there was a guy named Norman Seif, I think, that took the picture cover. And anyway, it was just a beautiful thing, and the record came out. This was a smash hit.
It was.
Smash. And it was nice to hear our song, Sweet Baby, every day, 20 times a day. It was great. We toured off of this record 6 years straight.
What?
6 years straight playing this music. And finally I said, George, I can't do it, man, anymore. He says, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I think we've squeezed every drop out of this record.
And that's why you had to record 2 more records.
Yeah, I mean, we had to record just to break it. But people loved this band and this music. And what was cool was we did, Wild Dogs on here.
Yeah, Sweet Baby.
Slade,
Let's Get Started. Yeah.
But the thing is, we did 2 more records, thank God, and that broke it up. And we played a lot of stuff, and we introduced a lot of people to jazz too, because our audience was like pop. It was a pop audience.
What do you miss about George now?
George was like a brother to me, and he lived like across town from me. And like many people, we'd go. George had the kind of house that he had the biggest studio, so you could go in the back of his house and be in his studio, not mess with his home, you know. And we just used to go in there. I mean, if I was off, I was over at George's house pretty much every day.
Wow.
And we'd hang out, you know, Byron Miller, the whole crew of people just come over. And George, and I played on a lot of records that George produced, Joe records, Diane Reeves, other people, and then he played on my records, some people that I produced. He did a really beautiful thing. We were playing on so many of each other's records. George was an interesting guy. He says, you know, Stanley, I play on your records and you play on ours, so I hand you money and you hand me money, so I hand you money. He says, it's all the same money. Why don't we just get rid of it? And we just play on each other's records. And we don't ever pay each other. And that's what we did. Wow. Yeah, we never, ever paid a payment to each other on anything, because it was the same money. And it's beautiful.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at the City Winery here at Pier 57 here in New York City. I'd like to personally thank the incomparable Stanley Clarke for his time. For more information on his upcoming tour dates and his master classes, please visit him online at stanleyclarke.com, and also support his new double album, which is coming out this summer. Also, I'd like to personally thank the staff and management here at the City Winery for their warm hospitality. For more information on directions and upcoming shows, please visit them online at thecitywinery.com. As always, people, I can't stress this more than enough. Please like, share, and subscribe to my videos here on YouTube and Vimeo, and leave comments. And follow me on social media by way of Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Until next time, peace.